Hi, everybody. I'm Karen Kierstead. I'm the Programs Manager at the Association of Nova Scotia Museums, and we are here for another track knowledge sharing session. We want to begin by acknowledging that we are in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people, and on what's a very beautiful day today. I want to say a huge thank you and acknowledgement for sharing this beautiful, beautiful land with us and giving the opportunity to live and learn together on behalf of me and my family and my ancestors. And with me today is Mary MacDonald from the Museum of Natural History. So we're just going to dive right in, and I'm going to invite Mary to introduce herself and her museum, and we'll get talking.
So yes, I am Mary MacDonald. I'm Curator of Interpretation here at the Museum of Natural History. And for those not familiar, the Museum of Natural History is one of 28 provincial museums that make up all of the Nova Scotia Museum system. And we've been around for over 150 years. Yeah, it's been a while in different iterations with some different names. And the current home of the Museum of Natural History is at 1747 Summer Street. And this building came into being in 1970. So, we're vintage. And in good ways and in bad. And the museum, we're responsible for collecting and recording artifacts of cultural and natural significance and promoting Nova Scotia's natural landscapes.
Very, very cool. So one of the reasons why we wanted to talk with you, Mary, is you guys are doing some really cool work that connects in with Mi'kmaq communities. And we've had a number of questions from museums across the province that are recognizing some of their interpretation is maybe getting a bit dated and needs to be addressed and done in a collaborative way. So I would love to hear about your Mi'kmaq Advisory Committee, how that came about and just how that developed and unfolded.
Yeah, for sure. Um, well, it's been a journey that the museum has been on for quite some time. So the Mi'kmaq Advisory Committee, it basically came about as the beginning of the development process for the museum's new Mi'kmaq Cultural Gallery. So the museum, for those who have been here years ago, there was what was called at the time an ethnology gallery. It incorporated archaeology as well as some Mi'kmaq culture, and it was very much in a kind of a Eurocentric approach to culture. So you kind of got the sense that, it was of a past peoples and not a current thriving cultural
Right.
community. So that gallery had been dismantled. And so from the beginning, it was determined that any move forward had to be community driven with the new gallery. And that's how the advisory committee came to be. So that was, I would say, over 7 years ago now.
Hmm.
And as well as the management, Roger Lewis, our former curator of Mi'kmaq Cultural Heritage, really spearheaded bringing the advisory group together. Roger is also a member of the Mi'kmaq community. And so basically it was through a lot of conversations and figuring out, who could be on this advisory committee. And it was very important to Roger that they would have young people, young professionals involved in it because, it's Indigenous peoples are the fastest growing population in Canada. And as Roger said, these are the elders of the future. So, it's important to
Okay.
have, those knowledge keepers, but also, having a contemporary feel to this gallery and include like, contemporary young professionals and artists, academics. So that's how that came to be. And I wasn't a part of the project at that point. I came in a couple of years after, but as far as I know, just approaching community members, telling them about, the project, and that we wanted it to be community driven and informed, and asking if they would be interested in being a part of it. And they were all on board, and they really volunteered a lot of their time over the years to share their perspectives and insights and talents. It was quite remarkable.
Hmm, very cool. And Roger's very connected with the Mi'kmaq Native Friendship Center. So
Mm.
is there a link with that organization as well?
Um, Kind of, yeah. So Roger, he's on the board of directors at the Friendship
Yeah.
Center. And so he's done an amazing work over the years of just building a bridge between the museum and communities to emphasize that this is a place for them, and this wonderful collection of Mi'kmaq cultural belongings are their belongings, and facilitating the access of community members to the collection.
Hmm.
So he did a lot of groundwork and like building relationships between the Friendship Center. And so it kind of grew in different ways over time. It's like they'd invite us to go to, employment fairs. So we would go and share, types of employment or volunteering experiences you could have at museums. What are some uh, cool belongings or something that might be of interest to folks? We did workshops at the museum with Friendship Center um, elders. Also, there was a collaborative exhibit done with the Friendship Center called "This Is What I Wish You Knew."
Mm,
And that was a really cool thing because it was basically built out of something that they had already done. So they had this art workshop for urban indigenous uh, folks to tell their stories through making a tile of artwork. And so they had all these done and they want to do something more with them. And they're just like, well, we'd be happy to work with you and create something. And at the end, it is their exhibit. And so that is something that the museum did. So tying in the stories of these individuals and how the long history of the Mi'kmaq in Nova Scotia, and then the introduction of European populations, how you can see some of those ramifications continuing to unfold in current day stories. So it was pairing
mm.
like historical with themes that are in the tiles that the individuals created.
Oh, that
So
sounds really cool.
yeah, so it's kind of grown in different ways, and just always being open for conversations, and trying to be very reciprocal
Hmm.
in that relationship.
Mm, nice. Um, so a couple of years ago, we started like really proactively trying to connect in with communities across the province and talked about like unlocking collections and things that are like the hidden stories and
Mhm.
how to better serve communities as museums. So thinking about that and your experiences, what would you say you've learned about like building that trust and maintaining those reciprocal relationships? Like we keep hearing that this is something, maybe it's because we're a field of introverts. I do wonder how much of that like plays into it, but we keep hearing that museums are feeling the need to learn about like how to build relationships between their organization and various communities. Like how do we get out there and connect and build and have it, yeah, have some really healthy relationships grow.
Yeah. Um, I think in conversations over the years that we've had, sometimes it's just putting yourself out there
Hmm.
and not being afraid to take a first step and make a phone call or reach out. I mean, it can be, a little, if you're coming from a world of introverts or introverted extroverts, um, uncertainty can be a little scary. And but putting yourself out there, and also a big thing is listening and making space is very important. So and actively demonstrating that you're listening to what you're hearing
Mm-hmm.
and incorporating that into next steps is something that has been really key for us. But the one thing I remember Roger also saying through the process is like, don't make it overcomplicated. It's
Yeah.
you just have a conversation. Like just
Just
that's
do it.
all. Just do it. Yeah, don't
Yeah.
talk about it, just do it. And I'm like, there's a lot of truth to that. Is that sometimes we can make things overly complicated or overly process oriented. Some
Mm-hmm.
process is good and is necessary, but also just having a natural um interaction and just like, hi, this is who we are. Next steps, blah, blah, blah. And I think, when working with community or the experience that I have had anyway, has been to, you're not necessarily going into the relationship with, this is our fully cooked idea and this is what we want. And so come and be a part of this. It's got to start at the very beginning and just we have this idea, but we don't know, or we'd
Mm-hmm.
like to learn a little bit more about this. And do you know of anybody? It's more of an invitation. It's not, can't like force a relationship, but first things first is just like put yourself out there, which sometimes
Mm-hmm.
is the hardest thing to do at first.
Yeah. And I sort of feel like we've been trained by um like grant applications and the need to organize and categorize so much too, that like it's so ingrained in us now that we've got to have those fully cooked ideas. Like, no, I need my plan, and I can't talk to anybody until like I have a good understanding of the plan. Then we can see who we can connect with and how things align and fit all those puzzle
Yeah.
pieces together. Yeah, I guess we have some unlearning to do.
Yeah, well, it's so true. And well, our museum is part of the provincial government. So, government's very much process oriented and like
Yeah,
forms and check boxes. And, a lot of like most communities don't act in that way.
right.
Things are a lot more organic. So part of our process too has been, making sure that we can just adapt the process and
Mm,
whatever processes those might be in government or museum system in order to make it work for what community needs. Or,
mhm.
and that that can be a big part of it. And so
Was
just
that
being
difficult to do?
comfortable. Um, Sometimes, I mean, I I didn't have to deal with a lot of forms and things like that, but I will say, like, it takes a lot of time to build these relationships and to build trusting relationships and maintaining. And so, you have to be able to um, be flexible. And
Mhm,
sometimes things take longer if you want to do things right and whatever right that might be for the situation.
mhm,
Um, so that's, I would say that is an important part is learning how to be flexible or going in knowing that I'm going to be flexible. We have to be flexible because it's not always about what we want. And this is going to grow into a beautiful flower of some sort. And we don't really know what type of flower that's going to be. Um, so yeah, I think that is a big part of it.
mhm. Would you say that this experience of working with an advisory committee and doing things that are community led, do you feel like that's kind of changed or reshaped your interpretation practices, or changed like how you're telling the stories in the whole museum, like beyond just this project or initiative?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, even before this project, we very much tried to always go to a source, depending on what a story was, like if it's a community or, you know, certain experts in the field, or when it comes to accessibility issues, going to those communities to get input and education and feedback. But this certainly just um, was a kind of like on an even bigger scale, I guess I would say, in a longer period of concentrated time. Um, so I really see that as being just another wonderful example of how rich a result you can get when you're working directly with that community or that content expert or what have you.
Mhm.
So, it's definitely something that we will continue to do um, for whatever the topic or anything is. And then make my advisory group, and it's now that the Gelasi Gallery is opened, it's not something that's just going to dissipate. It's just something that we very much want to continue with it. Um, you know, maybe some of the members might change as time goes on, which is
Mhm.
fair. And it's a lot of commitment from people, and you can't,
Yeah.
you want to get a variety of voices within that advisory committee. So we're open to changing who's involved and in what ways as well.
Mm. How much time or effort? Like I've been in the new gallery and it's amazing. Like it's
Yeah,
so lovely. Um, do you feel like the amount of work that people putting in, like is it way more than maybe anyone expected it to be? It sounds like it very much became like a labor of love, from the people that I've talked to.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, do you have a sense of how much heart and, heart and
Oh,
soul and time has
oh,
gone into
I sure do.
it?
A lot of heart and soul and time. And I mean, and a pandemic. That
Right.
was all a part of this process. So is the process went on a lot longer than anyone anticipated,
Hmm.
for like global reasons.
Right.
Fundings, that's all part of it, and timelines along those things, but also just, you know, listening to what we are being told and directions, and if something's not working, being ready to say, all right, well, if that's not going to work for you guys, then let's start out, let's look at something else.
Hmm.
Um, and so, and just like coordinating like logistics and meetings with everybody, these are people that have their own jobs, their families, other commitments, and
Hmm.
you know, you want to have as many people at the table as possible, but that also means scheduling. So
Right.
it adds a lot of time onto
Yeah.
those things. So um, everybody was very committed and passionate to the project, which
Hmm.
was amazing. Um, and it helped to carry it through sometimes when you're like, wow, okay, we can do this.
Yeah, we
We'll
will
find
get
another
there.
time to meet. We'll get there. Um,
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a lot of dedication by a lot of people,
Hmm. I
which
feel like
is
that's a really good segue into another question that I had rolling in my head is like, what were those challenges that you were facing? Like this wasn't an all internal project like a lot of projects can be. You talked about like the need to be really flexible on things and scheduling when you've got all these different people, different realities for them. Um, any other challenges or successes too that you encountered along the way and how you worked through those?
yeah. From my perspective, to me, the biggest challenge was logistics.
Yeah.
Logistics and people's timetables and scheduling like audio recordings, scheduling video recordings. You only have a set amount of time and set amount of people, and trying to get those all aligned. Like that can be a lot of work, and when people are in different areas, and then working with, contractors that are on the other side of the country and
Mm.
like different time zones. That was a big thing. Um, Other challenges, I guess that also is a great opportunity though, because it really showed like how you could problem solve, you were adapting as you go. Everybody was, looking for solutions and trying to make things work. So, it kind of turned into a happy situation in the end. But I think one of the most positive things were the people and the relationships that were built.
Hmm.
um, within the community members, the stories that they shared, the different perspectives, that people are able to see themselves literally, but also figuratively in this new permanent gallery.
Yeah.
Um, and I think, and well, another really, now I'm just going to talk about a really great thing that came out of it was the way that audio was used in the gallery, and that
Mm.
the idea of having, instead of just having like a set answer of somebody giving you some information, it was kind of more of a podcast feel of getting like three community members in a room, and they're talking about different issues and their perspectives and different topics, from power and politics to the rise of commodity art. And so like visitors just hearing this conversation happening between the community members, and it was much more of a like a natural conversation. And
Right.
that was very enriching, I think. And that wasn't initially planned. It was something that came out of conversations. And then one of our Raymond Sewell, who's on an advisory committee, he's an educator, but also an artist and has a lot of recording experience. And so he really kind of took that on and spearheaded, setting up all the equipment and everything. And he was super comfortable with all that, and great. So that was kind of a nice thing that just kind of organically happened. Um, but as far to go back to challenges, I think time, like I think with most projects, time, and then funding can be challenges.
Hmm.
Pricing changes after a global pandemic, and then the uncertainty of you know the world can have impacts on things. But you know, and we just have to get creative and roll with it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
That
Um,
answer your question?
yeah, totally. Absolutely does. As you were sort of describing how audio is used, it made me realize like, oh, we haven't really explained too much about like what the gallery looks like and
Fair point.
how that's set up. Do you want to just kind of walk people through what it's like and maybe yeah, talk about some of those ways that it's not the same as other galleries that you've got.
Yeah, for sure. Um, so at the beginning, um, no, Meg, we were asking Meg to tell us, and sorry, Meg stands for the Mi'kmaq Advisory Group. We just
Yeah.
called it Meg. It was
Yeah.
shorter. They were the ones telling us, like, what is going to be the feel you want visitors to have? What is the look of the gallery that you would want to see? What are the stories you want to be told? What are the cultural belongings you want in there?
Hmm.
So from the beginning, it was all directed by our advisory group. And one of the main things they wanted was, first of all, a contemporary look. So nothing, and they also didn't want like all muted natural tones. They wanted it to be vibrant and like colorful,
Yeah.
because Mi'kmaq artwork is colorful. So when visitors go in there, they're going to see colors like blues and reds and yellows and pinks and
Hmm.
purples, and in different combinations. And we were very fortunate to have different artists on the advisory committee, one of which being Jordan Bennett, and his artwork is very colorful.
Hmm.
And many Mi'kmaq artists have very colorful work, so that needed to be reflected in the space. So you'll see those kind of color combinations. Also language had to be a big focus. So not only was it Mi'kmaq language first, but also hearing the language in the gallery. So um, things that you would be able to see and do in a gallery, touchscreens and that have place names in Nova Scotia, but you hear the Mi'kmaq pronunciation of those place names. Um, you're There's a really cool interactive, one of my favorites is kind of like a speak and spell activity.
Yeah.
So basically it has these giant buttons on a wall with the different the Mi'kmaq alphabet basically and phonetics. So you're learning about Mi'kmaq phonetics, and you have a list of different Mi'kmaq words that you can try spelling, and each button you press, you hear the sound of that letter, and then when you spell your word and you press a go button, then you hear the whole word. So you're building the Mi'kmaq
Ah,
word so you can hear the different sounds that are important in the Mi'kmaq language.
mhm.
Um, but also you're going to be seeing and hearing language throughout the entire gallery.
Right.
There's also some big screens there, so with some projectors, and you step up to it and you'll see a gentleman named Bernie Francis projected on a screen, and he is the Mi'kmaq linguist, and we were so fortunate to work with him for this. And you can get some language lessons from Bernie, and so he goes through like a number of language lessons where you can learn the basics of some Mi'kmaq phrases, Mi'kmaq phonetics,
Mhm.
and then you see what he's talking about, like in kind of written or imagery form on the other side of the screen. So it's really cool to go up there and do it yourself, but it's also cool when we're walking through and I'm seeing people and you can see them like saying the words and pah, pah, like making the sounds and that Bernie's saying to do.
Yeah.
So that's kind of another layer of the language that you're seeing. And then, as we mentioned previously, you're hearing the conversations
Mm,
along this whole bank of cases and drawers that are displaying cultural belongings on topics like power and politics or trade or artwork. You're hearing
mhm.
these conversations from these domed speakers. So when you go underneath it, it triggers it and you start to hear those conversations. Um, so those are some of the things you can experience. And also buttons, more buttons. Because who
Because
doesn't like
everybody
a
loves buttons.
button? Everybody wants to press a button. You get a
Yeah.
button that lights up, and then it lights up some medicinal plants, and you hear the sound of the Mi'kmaq word for those medicinal plants and the English word.
Mhm.
So those are kind of the things that we have in there. And like a creation story. So you hear the creation story being told to you. So it's just like layering in
Mhm.
language and trying in different ways of learning for people. Um, and I guess I would say this is kind of a cool thing, but it's also a challenge, and it's a challenge that we face. And I'm willing to bet all the other museums out there face it too. Is technology. Um,
Yeah.
this gallery does have a lot of technology in it, which is super cool, but also terrifying
Right.
because, you know, inevitably something goes wrong.
Mhm.
And, we don't have like an in-house tech person. We're very much kind of technology, you know, cowboys or cow people trying to like figure things out.
Mhm.
That's not the right expression, but so that will be an ongoing challenge for us.
Mhm.
Like right now, we work with a company and we have their support for a year,
Okay.
which is really great. And they do troubleshooting and all that, but that will be a challenge that, will continue to be. But it's kind of unavoidable because you need to have that audio,
Right.
sound, the language to be living. So, gotta have it.
Yeah. So how, because I know some people will be watching this and listening to this and thinking like, where did they get their money from? Is this like
Yeah.
provincial funding? Were there federal funding involved? Combinations?
Yes. Many combinations. Many combinations. Yes. We couldn't do this on our own.
Yeah.
So yeah, there was funding from Canadian Heritage, there was funding from ACOA,
Oh, wow. Okay.
there was funding from provincial government, there was
Hmm.
funding from our board of directors.
Hmm.
It really took a lot of help. We had
Hmm.
to get a lot of help. and a lot of partners to bring it to fruition.
Yeah.
So certainly, so there were Nova Scotia Museum staff that they were miracle makers like Penny Harvey and Christine Sikora working out on the funding aspect. Thankfully, I didn't have to do that. Uh, but yeah, it took a lot of partners,
Yeah.
definitely.
Fair.
Yeah.
Um, I think this leads me to my final question for you. Again, thinking of all of the museums that are across the province, and if there's somebody who is listening to you talk and thinking like, "Oh, this is so cool," and I want to, embrace that inspiration and figure out how I can start, you know, building bridges into community and looking at community-led um, interpretation and exhibits and programs and all of that really fun stuff. What do you think your like key pieces of advice would be to them?
Um, I guess I would say like, do your research, look around, like who's in your community. But also go in with a collaborative mindset. Um, go in, um, not don't go in with expectations of go in with wanting to work with the people, you know what I
Hmm.
mean? Whoever the community or group is that you're reaching out to. I think that would be and just ask questions. Um, and yeah, ask questions, listen, um, and be willing to incorporate the knowledge that you gain.
Mm,
Um, so because that matters.
yeah,
You
absolutely.
have to show that you're willing to listen and incorporate and adapt and let go of whatever plan that you may have had if that's not the plan that is going to work for that
Hmm.
community or for that organization or group, whoever you're reaching out to. You have to be willing to let go.
Yeah,
Don't get too attached to something that's not going to work.
yeah,
If they're telling you it's not going to work, then it's not going to work.
yeah. Very fair.
So,
Yeah, yeah,
um, but yeah, I would just say like just ask questions, just introduce yourself.
yeah. Come in
And
and
just
have some
start
tea.
there. Yeah, just start there. You don't have to, you know, go in with any giant agenda or anything. Just go in and ask questions and introduce yourself. I think the biggest thing.
Sounds good. I think
Start
that's good
simple.
advice. Yeah, keep it simple. Yeah, yeah, for
Keep it
sure.
simple.
Cool. Um, any final other thoughts that you would like to share with everyone today, Mary?
Um, I don't think so. It's been real. Thank you for inviting me to chat. I really appreciate it. And I mean, we're by no means experts. We're always learning every day. So this is just what few things that we've learned along the way. We're continuing to learn every single day too. So, we're always happy to hear about your successes out there and your projects or insights. We'd always love to learn too. So I'd be happy to hear about any of the projects that anybody has on the go as well.
Awesome. I think that's like one of the biggest things we're hearing like through track for sure is maybe not half the time, but sometimes it feels like half the time the conversation or the question is just, well, what are other museums doing? So like for me,
Yeah,
I think this is like I love the knowledge sharing component and being able to like really dig into it now to be like, oh yeah, let's hear like
yeah,
and let's celebrate these cool successes that people are experiencing and the lessons they're learning along the way because it's just so incredibly valuable for everyone. And let's be honest, a lot more interesting sometimes than, reading some article online or, yeah, going to
yeah.
a conference or whatever, right? It's just cool to hear what's happening in the province.
Absolutely. No, I love this concept. I think it's
Yeah.
great. I mean, articles are fine and conferences are good, but I love this kind of format and just hearing, conversations that people are just having. I think that's
Yeah,
fantastic. It's a great way to
yeah,
learn.
very good. Yeah. Well, thank you very much again for joining me today. This has been awesome. Um, I can't say enough good things about it. I don't know. I really loved
Too.
the exhibit. Got to go to the opening, which was very nice to be able to see it. And yeah, it's so cool, and it's such a great um, model for community-led exhibits. Love
Thank
it.
you. Thank
Yeah.
you very much. I will say, I'm sorry, just one more thing, but so glad that you came to the opening. The opening was really exciting. We had a lot of community there, and since the gallery opened, we have seen an increase in people who are self-identifying as Indigenous, be it Mi'kmaq or other
Hmm.
nation, and much more so than in the past. So that's a great sign of success to us. And we've had a
Yeah,
lot of community groups coming in. So, it was the community building for the community. So seeing
that's lovely.
community embrace it, it's like, oh,
Yeah.
thank God, that's
Yay!
great. Yay. So it's great.
Very good. All right. Well, thanks again, Mary.
Thank you.
And we will talk very soon, I'm sure.
All right. Sounds good. I'm here.
All right.
See ya.